What if the things you were taught would save your soul, and then the very thing that fractures your identity, silence your instincts, and trains you to distrust yourself? Today, we're talking about spiritual control, religious trauma, and what it really costs to leave a high control belief system. I'm your host, Edna White, and this is Unchurched, part of Keeping It Real on Purpose. Today, we're going to have a candid conversation with Daniel John Carey. I got it right. And examine the history and the inner mechanics of the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. Am I saying that right? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. Not from rumor, but the lived experience and documented patterns of control. Welcome to the show as we unpack this.
Thank you. We'll see what happens when we're talking.
Don't be so controlled. I hear it. Just get excited about it. So it's really, going through it, I know it's like, it's one of those subjects that, you have to talk about. Some of those ones you don't really, want to talk about sometimes, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about it because I wouldn't want anybody to go through what I went through, because I was put through a lot of nonsense, and I was young and I didn't know a lot of things. The way I got into it is the first 4 years of my schooling, I went to Catholic school. And then for some reason, I didn't know why, but my family dropped away from the Catholic Church. Okay. It was never explained to me. Nothing was ever explained to me. I was in one of those families that really didn't communicate. And so then I went to public school, not knowing why we left the Catholic Church. I kept going every Sunday for a while, but I eventually stopped. And then I had a belief in God and Jesus and all that, but I didn't really know much about it. And I grew up in a household that had a lot of issues, a lot of problems, deep poverty, and a lot of brutality and alcoholism. And we didn't get the help we needed. My parents definitely never got the help they needed. And that's a nice way to put it, because we're here to talk about that. But I was completely unprepared for life. By the time I was, I got out of high school and I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any education really other than public school. And I had to get away from the people I was born into, and badly I needed to get away from them because there were too many, anything that you don't want to hear about went on. And it was, so I got out and I moved to California. I grew up in Ohio. And then I didn't know what I was doing. I was just out of high school, and I ended up just working regular. I got a job as a dog groomer. I was leading a pretty wild life. And it just didn't seem like the life I wanted. And I was really a mess case, and a mess, you're typically around people who are a mess, because they're about the only ones who will, because they're not dealing well with life. You don't know anything about life, uneducated. So I was around a lot of very troubling people. Yeah. And I didn't want to live like that. And I was afraid the phone would ring with like the last girl, the girl before that, or some other girl, you're a father.
Yeah.
I didn't want to live like that. And I didn't want to have the type of problems I saw the people around me having. Well, I saw other people who seemed to have their life together. So I had to change my life. And I started meeting these girls who were very clean and nice and pleasant and pretty. And they were Mormon. And so that's how my introduction to the church.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I didn't know then that back when the girls grow up, they're taught to get boys to join the church, and get boys to go on missions, and get boys, because the church really likes, as many members as possible.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then, so I ended up joining the church. And then the indoctrination starts. And I didn't know much of anything. The internet wasn't around back then. I couldn't research anything. And so I trusted everything I was told. And all that I was told about the church is what I was told from the church. I never read or looked at anything about the Mormon church from any other source. Learning about the church from the church. And that's how cults go. And they
Right,
warn,
exactly.
yeah, they warn you about reading anything from any outside sources, because
Yes.
their theory is like, if you want to learn about the church, then ask the church. Why would you go? If you wanted to learn about car
Mm-hmm.
mechanics, why would you go and ask a fisherman? You would go to a car mechanic. So if you want to learn about the
Right.
Mormon church, you go to the Mormon church. So I was reading all these Mormon church books written by church leaders, and I was reading the Book of Mormon, and I thought that I finally found my place and this was safe, and I was
Mm-hmm.
around
Mm-hmm.
alcoholics, and I wasn't around drug addicts, and I wasn't around people who were guilty of things that they went to prison for. A lot of the people I knew in my young adult life did go to prison, and some of them are dead, and they led really horrible lives, and I got out of that.
Wow.
So then I was going to school in college. Let me turn this off. But I was driving limousines, and I was working at a gym, and I was doing all sorts of jobs, and I was going to college, and I got an apartment on the beach. And then the church teaches you that every young man must serve a mission.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I wanted to get married, and the girls were pressuring me, you got it with a Mormon girl and you're a young guy, and they're like, have you gone on a mission? Why don't you go on a mission? You should go on a mission. And all these girls were telling me to go on a mission, and I wanted to do the right thing. And I wanted to,
Right.
it was like 2 years of your life that you had to give
Wow.
up. But I wanted to go get married. I wanted to have a nice life. I wanted, and the only thing I was learning at that time, I had basically disconnected from any friends who weren't Mormon. Everybody around me was Mormon. I would
Right.
go to church for 3 hours on Sunday. I would go to church events, and I was going to this Institute of Religion that was across the street from the college I was attending. And I was all about Mormon.
Oh yeah. It sounds about right. Yeah, go ahead.
An interesting thing was, back then, the only thing I knew when I joined the church about the church leader, who was Spencer Kimball, is I saw like this grainy video of him giving a talk, and I thought he was black.
Mm-hmm.
So I had no idea about the church's history with African Americans or anything about that at all. And it took a few months, and I mentioned to some girls about I heard something, and there were some black people at church, so I never really thought about it. And then I made some comment, and about Spencer W. Kimball, being a black man, and everybody was like, "What are you? What?" I'm like, "What? Isn't he? I thought he was."
Right, because you never saw him. Right.
Yeah. And they're like, "No, he's not." And I didn't understand their response.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize it would be offensive to them, I guess. And for a long time, the church didn't allow black men to hold the priesthood until the 1970s or something. Right. And then they started allowing black men to, but if you research it, it's more about government laws and stuff. And that's, but they said it was a revelation from God. Black men could now join the priesthood. And so, there's a whole history of that. But so I was starting to learn stuff as I was going into the church. And then I decided to go on a mission, so I dropped out of college. I dropped out of my apartment. I dropped my job. I dropped everything. I was leading the life I should have been living, going to school, working, living on the beach. That's part of my requirement for life. No, but so then to go on a mission, you have to go through the temple. The temple is a separate building from the chapel. And to go to the temple, it's all secret what goes on in the temple. They don't tell you anything about that goes on in the temple.
Okay.
I only knew about very little. And I was told it's the most sacred place on earth, inside the temple. And so you have to go get your bishop interview. The local bishop of your chapel interviews you like 10 questions and stuff, and then gives you a temple recommend that allows you to get into the temple. And you have to go through the temple ceremony before you go on a mission.
Wow.
So I don't know anything about what's going to go on, because I have asked members and they wouldn't tell me. And they're like, it's not secret, it's just sacred. And so the
Wow.
first thing, have you ever heard about what goes on in the Mormon temple? Have
No,
you? No?
no,
Oh,
no.
well, I knew nothing and I was young in my early 20s. And so the first thing they bring me to is I mean, I was just in a suit and tie and like I'm going to church or something. The first place
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I knew is a locker room, and I'm told to take everything off,
Wow.
and wear this. It's like this white poncho fabric thing,
Right.
and I don't know why. And I see other people in the other men in the locker room are coming out of their locker stalls, and they're wearing this white poncho thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm like, okay, so I put it on, and the sides are wide open, like there's no buttons or anything. So I took the pin from the key. There's like this key with a big baby pin thing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I pulled the sides to the front and I fastened it shut. And then they assigned me an escort, this guy who I
Mm-hmm.
really didn't know. And they bring you to they're like, oh no, you can't. You have to have that open. And I'm like nervous and I'm uncomfortable. So
Right.
take that off. They bring me to this one tent room. It's this room with cloth walls, and you also have to bring, before you go to the temple, there's a store behind the temple where you buy your underwear. There's Mormon
Right.
underwear, which is separate from normal underwear. It's
Mm-hmm.
just longer shorts down to your knees and a regular t-shirt, but there's these symbols sewn into them. So you bring those to this room with you. And it's the first time I even was learning about them. And then there were two men, one like touched different parts of me with water to bless me. It's called the washing, even though they're just like touching your shoulder, your head.
Mm.
I think, I don't know. They touch different parts. They touch my belly and then I think my legs or something. And then there was somebody who popped his head into the room and they needed help at another room because I guess somebody fell or I don't know what was going on. So that guy who just did the water washing thing left.
Right.
And I was left with this old man who I didn't know these people. So he
Right.
started
Wow.
whispering these prayers, but I don't know what he's saying. He's really
Mm-hmm.
close to me. He's facing me and I don't know. I don't know what you're saying. And he just kept talking and he's touching me with like oily fingers on my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then his hand went there. I didn't know what
Wow.
was going on. I didn't know if this was part of it. I had no idea what was happening. I just stood there like, and then before I know it, the other guy came back in the room. So I don't know if that guy stopped because the other guy walked in the room.
Right.
I didn't know but his oily
What
hand.
was going on? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And then they have you put your sacred underwear on.
Mm-hmm.
They held the bottoms open for me to step into, which was awkward. Like I'm in my early 20s. I don't ever
Right.
have anybody assist me getting.
Right.
So
Right.
I kind of like got those on and I'm wearing this poncho thing. Then you got to take the poncho thing off. I put the t-shirt on and then this man starts trying to tuck my shirt in. And I'm kind of like elbowing him, like, I got it, I'm good, I got it. But he was very insistent. He put his hands places he shouldn't have. Then you go back to the locker room and you put on all your white clothes, white pants, white jacket,
Yeah.
or white
Right.
shirt,
Right.
white tie, white shoes. And you go to this other room and there's all these pews and they show you like this film of like Adam and Eve and the world be created. And they stop at once in a while, they give you instructions and there's things they tell you, these different handshakes they show you to get into heaven. And this is all new to me. I don't know what's going on. Everybody's dressed in white. There's men and women, men on one side, women on the other. And there's clearly other people like me who don't know what's going on, young people, and they're with somebody. And there's a part of it where they have you commit everything about your life to God and building up the kingdom of heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And then you promise by using your thumb and as this fits a knife, and you promise that you will keep these things safe and sacred, or else you give your life to be taken.
Wow.
And you also make motions to slit your belly and remove your heart. And I'm looking at everybody else is doing it. I'm doing it. And then there's the handshakes, and then they take you to this curtain wall. and you're dressed in all this other stuff. You put a robe, this white robe on, and you have this white hat on, and it ties to a string to the thing on your shoulder. They bring you to this white curtain wall, and a hand comes through, and you're supposed to show this person the handshakes that you just learned. There's somebody standing next to you to remind you what to do. And that person on the other side of the wall like puts their hand on your shoulder and brings you in, and they're like whispering stuff in your ear and asking you the names of the handshakes. And I didn't remember, and the guy keeps telling me what the handshakes are. And then eventually they also give you a new name at that time. Mine was Jared. And that's the name you're supposed to have in heaven. And then they bring you through the curtains to this big room, which is a big like living room. Everything's white. There's chandeliers. It looks very expensive, but it's just like Nancy Reagan style or something. It's just not like, this is supposed to represent heaven, but it's this very, very, very large room, and all the other people are coming in, and they're all dressed in white with their white robes, and they're this like green apron thing that represents the fig leaves of Adam and Eve. And that's going through the temple ritual. And but also, because of the way they do it, well, you promise never to reveal anything that goes on in the temple, or else God will be displeased and you're giving up your life. You're threatened with death.
Right. Already early.
So then a couple of days later, I was in the MTC Missionary Training Center in Utah, baffled by what I went through, unable to speak about it to anyone, or God would be mad at me and I'd die or whatever. And I spent 2 weeks in the Missionary Training Center with all these other young guys. You're broken up in like teams of 10 or something, and you go through all these classes for 2 weeks, and you learn all the stuff you're supposed to teach non-members on your mission. You're going to spend a couple of years going door to door, knocking on doors and trying to talk to people. And you have to memorize these lessons that have exactly what you're taught, memorized. And you're on your mission. You're not allowed to dance. You're not allowed to date. You're not allowed to hug anyone. You're not allowed to listen to music. You're not allowed to read anything that's not church related. You're not allowed to go swimming. You're not allowed to do anything other than work for the church all day long, every day, except for like several hours on Monday where you could like do your laundry and go grocery shopping. And you're not paid. You're not paid.
Wow. At what point, let me ask you, from this scenario, what point does religion cross the line to from that spiritual guidance into psychological control?
I know, I was feeling it, but I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody, and I didn't know anybody else other than Mormons, and I was surrounded by Mormons, and I'm on my mission, and I'm with a missionary companion 24 hours a day. You're with someone. You sleep in the same bedroom, separate beds, but it's another young guy who you're assigned to be with 24 hours a day.
He's already gone through this already.
Yeah, he's also on a mission, and you're only allowed to dress in white shirts, ties, and dark colored pants, suit pants, or a suit. And so you're working every day, all day long, just trying to talk to people about the church. And the only thing you're able to read is church books. The only thing music you can listen to is like the Mormon Temple choir, tabernacle choir. You're not allowed to do anything else. You're not allowed to go on a vacation or go hang out with friends or make friends, or so you're really, it's 24 hours a day. And it got to I had so many questions, and I would ask my companions, and they grew up in the church, so they would answer some of them. Sometimes I would ask the mission president who was over our region. I was in New England, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut. I had a lot of questions, and sometimes he would just say, you have to have faith, and there's things you're going to learn in heaven that you're not going to learn on earth, and like say stuff like that just to like dismiss my concerns.
Well, at that point, did you realize that there was a heaven?
I always believed in heaven since I was little, because I went to Catholic church. And so, but this concept of their heaven seemed completely different. Theirs was, they say they had the true teachings of Jesus. And the church was started by this guy in the early 1820s. His name was Joseph Smith.
Right.
And he wrote this book with some other people. He says he wrote it himself, and he said it was inspired by God, and it's translated from ancient scriptures from the American continent, what are now the American continents. And they tell the story of ancient Israelites who come to the Americas thousands of years ago, and then Jesus comes and visits them. And the Book of Mormon, I was too ignorant and uneducated to realize how much it was just a bunch of nonsense, because it reads like part of the Bible. It's like Bible fan fiction. Now I realize it's filled with anachronisms, because it mentions things that weren't even in America. Like it mentions horses, it mentions chariots with wheels, it mentions swords. There was no metallurgy in the American continents until the Europeans brought horses, brought metallurgy and different teachings. They brought cows and pigs. But the Book of Mormon talks about all these things as if they existed before Columbus, thousands of years ago. But I didn't know that then, when I was in the Mormon church, that the Book of Mormon was filled with all these errors, historical errors. It mentions, cattle. It mentions pigs. There were no domesticated farm animals in the American continent before the Europeans brought them.
Right. Did you ever think that you were going to be punished when you questioned?
I felt like I was being kind of stupid and uneducated, and all these other boys who were on their missions, they were all grew up in the church, and every time I asked a question, it was like, "Don't you know that?" And I'm like, "No, I joined the church about a year before I went on my mission, so there's a lot of stuff I don't know." And they would give me church books to read and try to find the answers in there. There was one book called by Spencer W. Kimball, who was the prophet of the church at that time, called The Miracle of Forgiveness. And it's a really dark book, and it talks about how it's very brutal. I mean, it talks about how like homosexuality is next to murder. It talks about all this stuff, and the book literally has driven people to commit suicide. I don't know if you say that word out loud on yours, but to end their lives. And there was, especially in the 80s, 70s, 80s, there was a lot of young people committing suicide, or ending their lives, because they felt so guilty about their life or what they were or whatever. So I felt, when I was on my mission, there was a point where I just wanted to leave, but I didn't have anywhere to go, because I had disconnected from the family who I was born into. I didn't know any of them. I didn't have any friends who weren't Mormon. I didn't have any money. I had given up my apartment. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. And so I was stuck, and I thought maybe I should just have more faith and like dive into reading the scriptures more and just be the best.
Did you know what faith? But when he said that to you, did you know what faith was at that point?
I just felt that at that time it was to trust them and trust the church and trust.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Believe in the church leaders and what they're telling you, and that they are local leaders would testify, like, the church is true. The church leaders are the leaders of God, God's church on earth. And we're part of that, and we're here to convert others into the church and bring them salvation.
Wow. So during this time, what happened to your identity? Like, during this time, like, with what you were going through, how was your identity ever challenged?
They tell you to leave your earthly self behind and take on the mantle of God, and you're here as a mission, and you're working for God and spreading the word of the Lord, and have faith, and be righteous and obey the church leaders and all that stuff. So that's all you're really told. If you ask any questions, pray, fast, spend like 2 days not eating and praying, and try to feel the Spirit, and listen to your church, the talks on Sunday, and study the gospel. It's always the same thing.
Right. Okay.
There's no mental health care with the missionaries. You're living you're living in poverty. you're not
Wow.
treated really like a human being. You're just treated like another missionary, and you're another a peg in a hole or whatever.
Right, right.
There were many times where I almost left, and there was one point where I couldn't stand my companion at all. Told the mission president that if you don't separate us, I'm leaving. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm leaving.
Right.
He's like, well, I have to pray about it. And I'm like, you don't have to do anything. You're just going to separate us or I'm gone in 2 days. And I should have left. But 2 days later, I had another companion. And so he seemed like a really good guy. He grew up in the church, but he was a lot of fun. He was smarter and from a good family and all this stuff. And we got along really well. And I really like just going out and talking with people. I really like just getting, and people, I got known as like attracting maniac because I would just go all day and just like try to talk to people. Some missionaries, they just want to play basketball and hang out. Yeah.
Wow.
And complete their mission so they could go home and get married and go to school. But it really puts your life on hold and it infantilizes you because then you're doing this.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're 2 years of your life where you're just not dealing with yourself. You're not developing yourself at all. You're not going to school, you're not educating yourself. You're not developing your career. You're not dating. You're not developing relationships with women or whatever you're into. You're not yourself. You're just denied, and you're suppressed. And
wow,
it gets to the point where you don't really know who you are anymore. You're just another Mormon. And but you can't talk about certain things or God's going to be displeased. But I ended up feeling stranded on my mission, but I just dedicated myself. And then finally I went home and I knew this kid from where I grew up in California. I mean, where I left for my mission in California, and he had left to college, and he said his bedroom's available. You can go live with my parents, because I didn't have anywhere to go and I didn't have any money. So I went and lived with this couple. I didn't even know them, and got a job.
Now, is this part of your mission or no? This is afterwards.
That's after I left my mission.
Gotcha. Okay.
I came back to California, and so I got a job working at I actually was going to go to school, and I had 8 weeks before I had to go to Utah to go to school. So I had 8 weeks of working. I worked for a pharmacy delivering drugs in a car that the pharmacy owned, and saved money, and went to school, and I hated it. I was at BYU, Utah, and I didn't feel any connection because I had already gone to college in California.
Right.
And BYU just seemed like some kind of high school, and I felt like there was no culture there. It was all a bunch of, sorry for the term, but a bunch of white people.
Yeah.
Who were also returned missionaries, and then young Mormon girls who were, a lot of them were there just to meet a boy to get married, because the women are really denied in the church. In fact, 12-year-old boys really received the first level of priesthood in the Mormon church. The women never receive the priesthood. There's no women leaders. It's all men.
Yeah. That's around the clock. That's around every religion. No, women are definitely washed from that. Yeah. So even when you're married in the temple, you're told to be submissive to your husband. And all that stuff. So it's all about the husband, and the husband has the priesthood, and the husband is the leader of the household, and but 12-year-old boys get the first level of priesthood, so then they're above any women of any age. Wow.
A 12-year-old boy has more spiritual power than a grandmother, and all that stuff. And it's amazing that women stay in the church, but there's a lot. I mean, it couldn't exist with all the women having babies, and sticking with their Mormon husbands.
Now, I know that belief is tied to obedience, right? How did it reshape your ability to trust your own thoughts and your emotions?
Well, I came from such a screwed up childhood that I felt like I was doing the right thing, and I found my answer to live a clean life. God approved of this, and Jesus is the leader of the church, and the church leaders are the people I should listen to. They're my authorities. And those are the only people I had in my life I looked up to them, I guess. After my mission, I started dating a lot because I just wanted to get married. I dropped out of BYU. I couldn't stand it there. But some people love it. I didn't. I just wanted to get back to California. And
Right, right. Yeah.
came back.
Nothing like when you go to some place like that, it's nothing like that in any other area. You can't accept it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
Utah is a different place. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
um I mean, Salt Lake City has a lot of non-Mormon people,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
but if like you're in another town and you go to
Mm-hmm.
get your car fixed and you're
Hmm.
not a member, the other people, they know the mechanic, so their car's going to go first. You know,
Right. Right.
little things like that that play
Yeah.
into being a Mormon in Utah or being a non-Mormon in Utah. But
Yeah.
I came back and I ended up homeless and got pneumonia. And
Wow.
these people let me live in their RV. These Mormon people who are really nice, they let me, but there was no
Right.
bathroom. I had to go find like, you know, in the
Right.
middle of the night, go find a tree or whatever
Wow. Wow.
in the backyard of the house with a hose
Hmm.
in the
So let's
morning.
go back to your teachings and all the practices you had before in the Mormon Church, getting ready to do those 2 years. Um, I know you told us a few teachings and practices, but were there any more that functioned as control rather than spiritual guidance?
Um, as far there, well, there's the you just have to wear the garment, the
Right.
underwear every day, all day, unless you're working out or swimming. But we weren't allowed to swim. We were allowed to play
Okay.
like, basketball on Monday or whatever.
Right.
I couldn't play basketball. I found out on my mission that I had kidney disease,
Oh wow.
which explained why it hurt so much to be bumped, which I didn't
Right.
know my whole childhood. I had a lot of pain whenever I got bumped.
Yeah.
And I never learned how to play contact sports, but all the other missionaries would play basketball and I'd sit and read my scriptures. And they thought I was,
Right. Gotcha.
on my
Gotcha.
mission, I found out I had kidney disease and I had to go all these doctor's appointments. And they started telling me I needed a kidney transplant and
Oh wow.
all this stuff. But as far as like spirit, I didn't feel spiritual at all in the temple. That's
Right.
the problem is I felt like a lack of spirituality.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
The only thing I felt was like that I was leading a clean life and I was no
Yeah.
longer around criminals who
Mm-hmm.
are like stuff. Like my first roommate ended up going to prison later, like years after. He's in
Mm-hmm.
still because what he did to some young people that I found out about years later.
Wow.
I had no contact with him once I was no longer his roommate when I was 19. And then my second roommate was such a bad person. He ended up killing someone later, years later,
Wow.
and ended up being shot by a police officer after he murdered someone. So
Wow.
those are the type of people I was around when I was on my mission, I was glad to be around people who weren't drunk. They weren't hitting me. They
Yeah.
were challenging me, screaming at me, throwing things at me. There was no fear of like someone having a gun. So I felt safe. Maybe that's what mainly I liked about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I was just trying to put all the puzzle pieces together, trying to study the church history, but I was
Mm-hmm.
learning it from the church.
Right.
After I left the church, like only a few years ago when I started researching, like what did I go through when I was in my 20s? And I started researching the church history a few years ago. And I found out all sorts of stuff I found out about Joseph Smith, who started the church, had like 30 something wives, including teenage girls. He would
Wow.
pressure teenage girls to marry him, and he's like 35 years old or whatever. He
Mm-hmm.
he even would like meet men and send them on missions to Europe, and then he would marry their wives.
While they were gone.
Yeah, and this one guy, his wife died and he had several children, and Joseph sent him on a mission and told the guy he would take care of his children. So he took the two pretty girls, had the two pretty girls move in with him, and then sent the other children to someone else. And then ended up one of those people he ended up marrying one of those girls. You okay? Your sound is off.
Yeah, I'm good. That's why I turned it off so I don't cough and sound. But I was listening to you. Yeah, I'm good. Wow. This is really good information, audience. I hope that you're getting some good teachings and experience from our guest today. One question about, we're going to get to the leaving the church and how that happened, but why does leaving the church often trigger fear, guilt, or sense of danger?
Well, you're told that, if you leave the church, you're going to lose everything.
Okay.
You're going to lose everything. And God will be displeased, and you won't have guidance, and you'll be with the sinners, and you'll never make it to the highest level of heaven. You're supposed to pay 10% of your income for your entire life to the church.
Yes.
Because
sounds so familiar.
yeah, or else you're sinning, and you're not going to get your temple recommend if you don't pay your tithing. So you can't go to a wedding of your family members or whoever gets married in the temple.
Yeah.
And you can't, if you leave the church, you're going to be denied blessings from heaven. By that time, I knew nothing but the church. I mean, I had a job. I worked at corporate jobs, and I ended up starting a parenting magazine in LA when I was going to college, and ended up selling that. But I was doing all sorts of stuff. I was getting into the newspaper industry and publishing industry, and going to college at the same time, because I never got scholarships or anything. So I was working my way through college after I went on my mission, and but I was dating only Mormon girls. I would always turn down. I had the opportunity to date other girls, and I never did. I wish I would have, but I ended up finding someone I wanted to get married to after a few years, and then she started drinking, so that wasn't gonna work, and that ended up really nasty. But
and this is a Mormon girl.
Yeah, she grew up Mormon.
Yeah.
And her coworkers got her to drink one night. She went out with her coworkers, and that set her off. And yeah, so that ended.
Yeah, because you don't really get to experience life when you're in these cults, as it is. You don't really get to experience, maybe drinking and saying, I don't like it, Then when you're thrown into it, it's like, oh, you do it too much. Because I know I did that. I did the same thing. I was like, everything was full on. Like, it was just full on everything,
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty wild before I joined the church, and I did stuff like I worked on movies and TV shows as an extra, and I had braces, and I would always be booked on these movies and TV shows as a teenager. And I also was a butler for Peggy Lee, the singer. And I made her food and lived in her mansion in Bel Air for a while, and all this stuff. And I had always had to deal with Frank Sinatra and all these different people. Tony Bennett was really nice. And also Pearl Bailey, I loved her. She was really nice. So I had this whole experience of living before I joined the church, and then I'm on my mission with all these boys who grew up in the church, and their mommy did their laundry, and their mommy made them their food, and they didn't know how to make food. And I had these missionary companions, and I would just start making food. I didn't even think about it, that there was anything. Anyway, oh, wow, you can cook. And they would write home that their mission companion used to be a private chef. And I was making simple stuff like sauteing vegetables and whatever.
Right.
They were used to eating whatever, I don't know, fast food. But so I saw how infantile people were from being raised in the church, and they
yes we are very infantile. So how did you leave? How did you end up leaving?
There were all sorts of things. Like my girlfriend, who I got engaged to, she started drinking, and I still stuck in the church, and I ended up going to I burned out on going. There's singles wards where it's everybody's single, and they're in their 20s and early 30s. And I got tired of that. I just started going to a family ward where it's married people and children and people of all ages, and there's some single people and stuff. And I was getting older. I was in my older 20s. And then I ended up in the bishopric, which there's the bishop of the chapel, and then he has two counselors, and I was one of those, in a married ward. And I started learning a lot of stuff about the ward members and their private life, because they tell everything to the bishop, and then the bishop asks us, his counselors, about what he should do about this. And he also talks to the stake president. And I started realizing who I'm sitting next to in church, and it just started giving me the creeps with some of the things I started learning. There was a man who had, there was this, not young man, but this man who was in his 40s, and he had done stuff to his children. And I was like, I can't stand some of these people.
Right.
I had a lot of questions and never
Yes.
got answers for, like, and I didn't feel spiritual going to church, and I was having all sorts of health problems with my kidneys,
Mhm.
and, there was a point where I died, the doctor said, in the hospital after I had kidney surgery one time when I was yeah, and then
Wow.
that was interesting. The nurse saw my eyes move. The nurse who came in the room to prep my body for the morgue, there was this guy coming up with a thing to put my corpse on and take me to the refrigerator,
Wow.
but she saw my eyes move, and, so I wasn't dead apparently, but, yeah, I was minutes away from being shoved into a refrigerator.
Wow. Did
Um,
your family know that you had they had you prepared to die?
I hadn't had any contact with those people
Wow.
in 10 years or more,
Wow.
like that. Um, and I didn't tell my girlfriend.
Wow.
Oh, a thing that happened was when I found out I had kidney problems when I was 24, in college, I got involved with this girl whose mom was like, "You're not marrying someone with kidney disease who's being told he needs a kidney transplant, and you're not
Mhm.
gonna be a young widow. You're not gonna be," and her mother really,
Wow.
like, got between us and made sure that her daughter did not get involved with me, and so I felt this thing of, like, I could never tell anyone about my kidney disease, and I couldn't,
Mhm.
like, because I thought I was gonna die. The doctors were telling me I was gonna die if I didn't have a kidney transplant or go on to, dialysis, and I kept refusing that, and so by the time I was later in my 20s, I started having bad health problems, and I ended up having
Wow.
kidney surgery, and then supposedly they said I died, and then so there are all sorts of things going on. So there's these things you could get a blessing, like men in the church could put their hands and pray over you. First, they put
Mhm.
a dot of oil on your head, and then they pray over you, and it's called a blessing, and it's supposed to help you. So I went and I had a problem because I had blessings and nothing was getting better. So I went and I
Wow.
who to speak with, and I ended up talking to the LA Temple president who I knew someone who knew him, and she said, "He's a very spiritual guy, you should talk to him," and I was at a loss because I thought I was gonna die, and I didn't care about a lot of things anymore because I was gonna die anyway, and my girlfriend, started drinking, and that fell apart, and I was in this ward, and I'm sitting next to people I can't stand, and I asked the temple president, "Can't I just get a blessing to fix my health problems?" And he told me, like, "If blessings work, then there wouldn't be any hospitals in Utah." He said that blessings are really only to give you hope and a good feeling,
Wow.
basically. So I was like, "Wow, that even he doesn't believe it.
Right.
I'm not
Yes.
getting this, and I'm having problems with," and I started finding out more and more, and I had a really good friend who was Black who was in the church, and then he stopped going, and, I started learning more about the church history with Black people and dark-skinned people. This is
Mhm.
interesting. The church is now spreading into Africa. They're
Right.
focusing on Africa, and they removed part of the Book of Mormon that the Book of Mormon they're distributing in Africa is different than the Book of Mormon we have here because they took out racist parts of it. There's a part of the Book of Mormon that talks about white and delightful or some
Mhm.
type of term like that, and that the Black people and other darker skinned people were cursed by God for sinning, and it's a really racist church when you look into it. And
Mhm.
there was like just Brigham Young, the second president of the church, who the Brigham Young University is named after.
Mhm.
He was extremely racist. I didn't understand that until a few years ago. I looked up things he said, and he was all for slavery, continuing slavery. And at that point, Utah wasn't even part of the United States.
Right.
To become the first governor of Utah and bring
Wow.
Utah into the United States, they had to give up slavery. And that's why
Right.
the church got away from slavery. Like Joseph Smith I think he was sealed to one of his slaves.
Wow.
Yeah. So that he's with his slave in heaven. There's these
Mm.
prayers they say and that supposedly seal you. But when I left the church, just at every I didn't feel close to it at all, and I ended up just writing them a letter, my local bishop, telling them, "Don't ever contact me. I'm not interested in the church anymore." And that was it. And then I just
Wow.
started living a wild, 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 wild I had a pretty
Yeah.
wild life for a while, and
Wow.
I also didn't care about a lot of things because I thought I was going to die, but I wasn't
Yeah.
dying. So yeah, I had to get my life together.
Yeah. So, what would you say to someone who has left but still feels guilt, fear, or spiritual anxiety?
I would tell them to research the history of the church, research the history of the Book of Mormon, and realize that the Book of Mormon is fiction. It has nothing to do with anything. Research the history of the Mormon temple practices, which Joseph Smith stole from the Mason temple ceremony.
Mm,
He rewrote
that's
it.
good information
Yeah,
there.
he rewrote it to make it into the Mormon church ceremony. He claimed that the Masons preserved some form of the temple ceremony throughout the centuries, that they were the original builders of the temple, and they, over the years, became perverted, and then Joseph Smith restored it to the original temple ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And then research, there's a book called the CES letter, Church
Mm-hmm.
Education System letter. This young guy who wrote a letter to the church education system guy at Brigham Young University and asked him a bunch of questions about the history of the church, because this
Mm-hmm.
young guy was having problems with all the things he was learning about the church. So he wrote this thing called the CES letter, and you could buy the book
Okay.
online, read that. Look up Mormon Stories podcast, look up Mormonish podcast, look up
Mm-hmm.
Mormon Discussions podcast. Look up Alyssa Grenfell. She has a
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and she used to be Mormon, and she went on a mission and everything. She exposes a lot of things about the church. And yeah, learn. Don't just trust in what the church tells you, because the church is only interested in keeping you in because they like that money, and they also are worth over $300 billion.
Wow.
Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. The church is worth way over billion dollars. They own land, they own
Yes. You know what? Yes.
farms, they own.
Thinking about it now, yeah. I think all churches are businesses. I really do. Because if you get a tax ID number, you're business.
Yeah, they've invested their money in international
Yeah.
stocks and gold.
Yeah.
They own oil fields. They own
But why do why do they remain so poor?
I know. And we're working in poverty on our missions,
Yeah, on your mission.
billion multi-billion dollar church,
Right.
recruiting new members for the church so that those new members then pay 10% of their income. The church
Oh,
actually supposedly has more employees to deal with running the businesses, because they own warehouses on different continents.
right. Yeah.
They lease those out to other companies. They own timberland, they own farmland, they sell the farm produce and farm meat and stuff into the food system that goes to prisons and schools,
Wow.
supermarkets and restaurants. They
Wow.
have their underwear factory, which is the only place you
Mm-hmm.
can buy your garments if you're a Mormon who goes to the temple, and you're supposed to wear garments for the rest of your life. So you got to buy, several pair every year, I
Wow.
guess. But they have a lot of money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. So, you after all of this, even when you went back and you were on the wild side for a little while, what did you start to do to start to rebuild your identity?
Art, music, being around a lot of
Okay.
artists. I ended up starting, because I was already in the publishing. I had started and sold a small magazine. I ended up working for
Gotcha.
some news weeklies. I ended up joining the Publishers Marketing Association, they changed their name now, but it's a group of publishers and authors from all over the world, book designers, book editors, book printing companies. So I learned a lot I was really into publishing. Ended up
Mm-hmm.
helping people write books,
Mm-hmm.
mostly doctors and nutritionists, some novels, but some books about the insurance industry, the
Gotcha.
life insurance industry. I was helping all these people write books, getting their
Mm-hmm.
books ready for publishing. And I dove into that. And I was also writing screenplays and helping to run a screenwriting workshop, which I still
Wow.
do now. I run this workshop in LA for screenwriters, and I help people write screenplays.
Awesome.
What's that?
I said awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
And I wrote a bunch of books. One's called Dream Your World. Another one's called Dream Another Dream. The Dream Another Dream one's a lot about.
Yeah, I just got them the other day, and I
Oh,
started reading them in the bed yesterday, so last night. So I was like, "Oh, this is really good. These are
yeah.
things I want to know." I said, "Just got them the other day."
Dream
Thank
Another
you.
Dream is more about like recovering from child abuse.
Hmm.
And I have a lot of issues and I still have nightmares from that. Dream Your World is sort of an extension of that book, but more about any kind of life. Then I wrote the book about kidney health. I never did have a kidney transplant.
Oh,
My book,
wow.
my book about kidney and health,
Yeah, I
heart
have that one. I'm so excited to read that. I am.
health.
I am
Yeah,
so
that book
excited to read that.
explains that. And I wrote, yeah, I wrote several books. And then, yeah, I started just living my life. I ended up working in the film and TV industry, which I still
Hmm.
do. I ended up working for a studio, one of the major studios in their
Yeah.
offices, and I'm in their script department for a while and as an assistant to the studio president, and while also helping people write books on the side. And
Okay.
yeah, there's dozens and dozens of books
Okay.
out there that have
So,
my
what is it that you think, from your experience, that would actually help people reclaim themselves?
um go toward your strengths,
Okay.
um which might be it's up to you. You know,
Hmm.
what feels good to you, what are you into, what helps you feel alive. I think everyone should connect to nature in some way, even if it's just hiking,
That's right.
kayaking, biking, go out, exercise, do sports, join a sports team, do art if you're an artist, learn how to play an instrument, read books, go to the library. That's one thing I started doing, is I started going to the library once I got
Hmm. One of my favorite places to go.
because I hadn't
Yes.
read any books other than church books for
Yes.
like several
Absolutely.
years. And so I started reading a lot of books. And there was one point where I
Mhm.
was reading like 1 or 2 books a day. I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. I ended up having a big garage sale and selling them and giving them
Yeah.
away. And then ended up writing a bunch of books. But
Yeah.
discover yourself. Go to the library and see what books
Mhm.
and topics interest you.
Yeah.
And don't give your money to a church.
Yeah.
Open an index fund and put the money in an index fund. Put 10% of your money every month into an index fund. That's way better
Mhm.
than giving it to a church.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that tip. Well, Daniel, thank you for sharing your story. I was totally just listening. You've given me some insight into another world of another religion, and thank you for just your words of encouragement. Because if you could do it, any of us can do it, and helping us figure out how to rebuild our identity outside of that fear-based faith. And I thank you for doing that, audience. If you want to connect with him, I do have his books. I actually, they're on the side of my bed, and I was supposed to bring them with me, so I want to leave them there because I have to read them. So I was going to show them to you. But how can we find you, Daniel? Tell us how to find you.
Right now, I don't. Well, I'm on Twitter, but it's only for screenwriting, and I have a
Okay. Okay.
screenwriting tribe page on Facebook where it's
Okay.
all about screenwriting. And then I have the
Okay.
books Dream Your World and Dream Another Dream, and some other
Okay.
books on Amazon.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So thank you so much for being here. The story was truly personal, but it was a great experience and I learned so much. Thank you so much. I know my audience did. So thank you so much for having this conversation with us. And if this conversation resonated with you, this isn't simply about tearing down the faith, but it's about telling the truth so people can finally breathe. This
Yeah.
is Edna White, your host and my esteemed guest. And we're going to say goodbye for now.
Thank you.